Hello and welcome back to the Live From Rest podcast. This is the first one in a while. And in this episode, I'm interviewing my son and co-founder of Live From Rest, Joshua Luke Smith. Josh and I are considering the challenge to defeat digital distraction. The challenge to escape from our phones and devices, at least occasionally. I'm Steve Smith, your host and the author of the Live From Rest app. In the Live From Rest podcast, we take time to explore the ancient art of being. We host conversations, short talks, and reflections about how we can live from rest in a world full of busyness and distraction. If you don't already have it, please download and use our app, Live From Rest. Discover meditation rooted in the way of Jesus and live a life of peace with freedom from anxiety, worry, and strife. Well, Josh, welcome back to the Live From Rest podcast. It's great to have you, my fellow co-founder of Live From Rest and son, back on the podcast. It's a while since we did a podcast together. So how's things going?
Yeah, doing really well. It's good to be back here. It's good to be exploring more of the themes that kind of have rooted the app and our reason for doing it all.
Which is one of the things that I thought we could talk about. I particularly wanted to talk about the whole subject of defeating digital distraction, because I just think that's massive. Recently, well, I think I'm always aware of it, but I'm especially aware of it now. Whenever I go out, you just see people walking, and sometimes I'm guilty of it myself, just walking along with their phones, looking at their phones. And I've been in London a lot lately, and you go on the bus, you go on the tube, and everybody, well, at least half of people are we're all glued to our phones. It's taken over our lives to some degree. And I'm aware, I think we're both aware of how distracting our phones can be, our computers, our various devices. And I'd like us to come on to that. But as before we talk about digital distraction and the rhythms of life that we're struggling to get, I thought we'd talk about the course that you recorded, it might even have been 3 years ago now, that we're promoting now on the app. We're calling it Living From Rest. And we've had some tremendous feedback from people that have used it. And Josh, maybe you could just say a few words about the course, about the Living From Rest course that you recorded for us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we're exploring three main themes of Sabbath and solitude and simplicity. And these are three, sort of really formative practices that have shaped my life, or the life of my family, my immediate family, but have shaped, the formation of followers of Jesus for thousands of years. Sabbath being a day, Sabbath being a practice that kind of captures a day of our lives. Solitude being a practice that runs through the entirety of our life in different ways. And simplicity really being almost like a philosophy, a way of moving through the world. And each of these three principles and practices are going to be constantly, pulled away from. We're going to be constantly tempted to leave them and not engage with them, not pursue them. So more than ever, I think we'll come on to talk about distraction more, but more than ever, these are themes of our lives and themes of formation for us to spend time exploring. And so the course just dives deep into them, the kind of biblical heritage, the way that Jesus engaged with these as practices, and the ways that we can engage with them now. And I'm not exaggerating when I say the Sabbath, the practice of solitude, the pursuit of simplicity has been absolutely life-changing for me. And I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and she already, deep in her psyche, has an awareness of, well, particularly the Sabbath out of all of those three. Yeah. And that the Sabbath is a day like no other day. I talk about this in the course, but in its earliest mention in the Hebrew text, it's used with the same language as a wedding day. It's a holy day. It's almost, what would you do on a wedding day? That's how you should go into the Sabbath. Like, this is a day unlike any other day.
Sure.
And so in our house, the whole week is building up and leading to the Sabbath. And it's so interesting seeing in her anticipation and her, how excited she is for this day that is set apart. And so, yeah, it's an exploration of three practices that will change your life, and as a result, lead you to live from rest.
Yeah, and Josh, you have led the way. I think it's mostly you as in our family. It has been a complete game changer. It really has. When we've established that rhythm of having Sabbath, it's something to look forward to. It's a challenge because people like me are so used to being busy, and it's something you have to fight for. You have to contend for it, don't you? Yeah. But it's something to look forward to and to cherish. I loved the musical Fiddler on the Roof, and I remember watching it at the theatre, and I just loved the scene of the build up to this wonderful time of families coming together, putting their work down, and just being together and being happy and celebrating Sabbath. And it's God's best for us, isn't it?
It really is. And I was reminded of it recently reading through Hebrews, and where the writer says of the Israelites, they failed to enter into all that God had for them because they failed to enter into his rest. And there's so many things that we think if we had, then we would achieve a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. If we had more of something, we'd achieve a deeper sense of satisfaction. But the biblical narrative is the more we step into rest, the more we achieve the deep sense of security and fulfillment that we long for. So it's actually in our abstaining and in our letting go and in our giving up that we receive. Jesus said, it's if you want to gain your life, then lose it. And the Sabbath is almost this opportunity every week to step into that. If you're building a career, if you have a high pressure job, if you're just motivated to work, there'll never be a good time to stop. But the more you do, the less you stop, the more you'll be at the center of what you're building, and the further you'll ever become from actually being able to take that time. So the Sabbath every week is remembering you're not at the center of it. Jesus is at the center of it. God provides, and you let go of your tools, so to speak. You put down your ability to earn, and you allow this kind of process of entering God's rest to begin. And it's incredible how it builds a internal appetite for trust. How you begin to trust God more deeply. So I think it's anyone who's used the app and anyone who is curious about a life of rest, I think will glean quite a lot from those practices that the sages and saints before us have pioneered. And obviously it's rooted in the biblical text. So we're just doing our best to redig the ancient wells and tell people about it.
Yeah. Well, we could spend a lot of time on those practices, but I'd like us to move on. But again, a plug for that course. It's available via the app or via our website, Living from Rest. And it works really well in small groups. It probably works well with couples or individuals. And we've got some discussion starters before the talk and after. So well done for doing that. They're just sort of short talks. It works really well. Yeah. And that concept of Sabbath, well, it's something that a lot of people think of being associated with religions, whether it's Jewish, Muslim, Christian. But I'm interested. I've heard people in secular society from different sources advocating a digital Sabbath. Mm-hmm. So even if there's no religious observance, as it were, I think we're now being encouraged to put our devices down. And because I think people are now realizing there's so much correlation between phone use and digital device uses and computer screens and so on, and anxiety and an impairment of mental health. Yes. So I know that you have really worked hard on this whole area.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mention it from a more kind of secular standpoint. There was a book that came out a couple of years ago. I can't remember the title verbatim, but it was something like The 1 Day Digital Detox. And I mean, it was probably 30, 40,000 words. But this book was literally about a 1 day digital detox. It was just take a day every week and just take time away from your devices. So, it was filled with scientific and sociological research and the implications of it. So it was interesting, but really the central message of the book was you will do yourself so much good by just taking a day out. And I thought when I read that, man, this is just ancient wisdom. So although our phones and devices are now creating a resurgence or a renaissance of this thought pattern of we need Sabbath or we need distance from this particular distraction, distraction is as old as time, and there has been a part of the spiritual wrestle, this part of the spiritual life for as long as we could read about, spiritual wisdom. The Benedict Award in the book, Sayings of the Desert Fathers, recounts this moment where a young monk goes to Abba Moses, who was one of the earliest kind of writers of the desert wisdom. For those that don't know, in the sort of 3rd, 4th century, there was a group of men and women who left the major cities, Turkey, Egypt, where Christianity had become so popularized, it was embedded into everyday life. But they felt like it had lost its radical edge. They felt like it had lost its essence and the true kind of message of Christ. And so they pulled away from the cities and moved out into the deserts, literally living in tents and caves, and spent decades out there, some of them never to be heard of again. And over time, collections of sayings and conversations were recorded and compiled. And one of the best collections is by Benedict Award, where these wonderful stories and sayings are presented. I think it's one of the best translations of the older texts. Fascinating stories. And in one of the stories, a young monk goes to Abba Moses, who's responsible for some of the largest amounts of these sayings. And the young monk says to Abba Moses, I'm wrestling with temptation. I'm wrestling with distraction. Mm-hmm. What is distraction other than temptation? It's a temptation to move away from the good and, from a value or a virtue that you're pursuing into something less, something more shallow. So I'm wrestling with these temptations. What should I do? And Abba Moses says to him, go to your cell and your cell will teach you everything. Well, the cell was the most basic, habit, the most basic full construct of sort of minimal life. Sometimes a cave, sometimes a little tent. So go and sit in a place with nothing in it, and you'll learn everything you need to learn. I've spent some time in cells. So I'm in a prison once a week, and just last week I was in the wings, and I went and sat in one of the cells with one of the inmates, just to have a conversation. And so I was in that cell, and I mean, I'm not great with measurements, but something like, I don't know, 4 by 2 meters. These are not large spaces. Enough space for a bed, a sink, and a toilet. I've also spent time in cells, the cells of monasteries throughout Europe, and they are pretty much the exact same space. Around this time last year, I was in a monastery just outside of Lyon, and I stayed there for 4 nights in the cells, and the cells there were pretty much the exact same size as the cells of the prison. These really confined, limited spaces. And the words of Abba Moses, came to mind as I was in those spaces. Go to your cell, and it will teach you everything you need. There's a Latin connection in the word cell to mean something of heaven, a little heaven, basically a portal, a space of connection. Yeah. And that's how they were sort of used. In that place, you can learn everything there is. So I say all of this to say, the wisdom of the desert, the wisdom of the saints and sages before us, and of indeed Christ, is if you want freedom and you want liberation, if you want fulfillment, you need to pursue less. Jesus in the Beatitude said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom. The poor in Greek is the empty, And we have been sold the lie and believed the lie that if we could have infinite, if we could have all of it, if we could have everything all at once, would achieve fulfillment. But if you sit and you scroll on your phone for any time, I mean, let's say, you spend 30 minutes looking down, which can happen. I've been there easily, 30 minutes just go. Easily. Yeah, longer. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever looked up and felt fulfilled? Have you ever felt like that was an enriching time?
Yeah.
And the answer for everyone probably is no, it wasn't enriching. It may have started with some, curiosity and, some entertainment, but it ended with this sense of being numbed and dull. And a story I love around this is Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, saw a client who was dealing with great anxiety. This is decades ago. This is long before the smartphone.
Yeah.
And, the client said to him, I feel anxious, I feel agitated, I feel frustrated. and people at work are complaining about my behavior and being around me. He comes to the great psychiatrist. What can I do? Carl Jung says to him, go home and sit on your own. Be on your own and do this for 14 days. Come back to me. Be completely on your own. So he comes back to him and he's agitated still. And he's frustrated. He said, I did what you said. And I still feel all this inner animosity. And he said, well, describe, what did you do? And he said, well, I did what you said. I came home and sat on my own. I read some Hemingway or listened to some Chopin, or, I did what you said. And Carl Jung says, well, I didn't ask you to read, and, I didn't ask you to listen to music. I asked you to be on your own. And he said, but I can't be on my own. And Carl Jung said, and yet that's the person you inflict on everyone else, 12 hours a day. and you can't even be with them. And there's something about our phone which makes us feel less alone with ourselves. Yes. The philosopher, mathematician Blaise Pascal said, all of man's problems inherently come from his inability to be on his own. So that's some theory, and I'll just make it really practical. I was on the train today, and I had a 15-minute train ride, and I had the dilemma that I always have in a moment like that. Do I sink into my seat and pull out my phone and distract myself for the next 15 minutes, or do I pursue the ancient art of simply looking out the window or looking around the carriage, just letting my mind wander? To allow your mind to wander is an incredibly healthy practice, just to let it meander around. And thankfully today I did choose that. I don't always choose that. And so defeating digital distraction is a spiritual practice. And you don't start with shame, don't start with guilt. Every single person who has pursued the spiritual life before you, all the way back to the deserts, has wrestled with this distraction. It just happens in 2024. This is the temptation that we're facing now. So that's some of my kind of thinking around it.
That's great. I mean, I was struck by thinking distraction equals temptation, because there's no harm. We sort of sense, well, what's the harm in being distracted? It's harmless, seemingly, so easy to do, and you don't really necessarily. I mean, as you say, we don't want to beat ourselves up about this sort of thing, but it is a temptation. It's something that draws us potentially into quite bad places. Yeah. So, and as you say, it's tempting when you're on the train. First, how many of us first thing we look at in the morning, last thing we look at night? Noticed, I remember in your toilet by your seat, you've got a suggestion that as you're on the toilet seat, you don't pick up your phone. I mean, it's how many of us actually go any length of time without our phone? So, how about some top tips? Or were you going to say something else?
No, well, I was just thinking. You're a doctor, and in a sentence, what is the reason someone would have an anesthetic before a procedure?
To so they don't have pain.
So they don't have pain. And I think the reality of distraction is that distraction is a anesthetic. It's a way of numbing. Your body is numbed, so you don't feel the pain in that area. And that's one way of applying it, isn't it? Of like, it's going to numb this area, but we have this, and the phone does that. And so I just want to name that, because it's not just because you want to get lost in the black hole of YouTube or whatever it is. It's actually more often than not a way of not feeling something. And to deny yourself the opportunity to feel is ultimately to deny yourself the full expression of your humanity. Anything that has truly inspired you or awoken you has come from someone else engaging with the entirety of their humanity, whether it's their, exuberant joy or whether it's their untempered, sorrow. And so for me, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, and it's absolutely critical that I stay alive and awake to the world. And, I'm constantly being tempted not to. So, I mean, were you going to ask about just kind of practices?
Yeah, well, let's have, because I'm aware of the time, and we may want to try and land this soon, but let's have some practical tips. I mean, how do we escape from the temptation to just go to our phone? I mean, we're talking about digital distraction in general, but for most of us, the phone is perhaps the number one temptation. Of course, maybe our laptop as well. Give us some top tips, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I'll only speak out of my own experience, and I'll say everything I'm saying now is in practice and also something that I'm still every day having to choose to do. And some days I do better than others. So, I mean, the first thing I'd say is don't believe your shame. Shame is the belief that you are something. Guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong. So every single person who relates to this probably has quite a high screen time, and all that kind of stuff. And you can begin by feeling so bad. Listening to that voice isn't going to help you. So the first thing we want to do is just move away from listening to that voice. Go and live from rest. Do a meditation. Do the beloved meditation. Remember who you are and whose you are. So don't listen to shame and make it simple. Make it simple. The other thing I'd say is don't tell anyone you're doing it unless it's someone that you're really wanting to be held account to, because as soon as you tell someone you're doing it, you get a little kind of, celebration in the brain that says you've already done it. You don't want to tell too many people you're running a marathon. You just need to get out and train. So just do this quietly. Just make it a daily thing. So the first thing is simple. Just find a place in your house to charge your phone that isn't in the bedroom. That's just we probably practiced that for, 7 years now. The phones do not come into the bedroom, and you need an alarm clock or another very minimal type of device that can just give you the time. Honestly, you start there, and that's week 1. Just 1 week, no phone ever in the bedroom. Why? So the first thing you think about and the last thing you think about is either just an original thought, whether it's a heavy thought or a light thought. It's an original thought. It isn't someone else's thought, or it's an offering of prayer. It's just a simple way of engaging with this kind of mind at rest. And, at the beginning and at the end of the day. So, we'll start there. And then I would say, week 2 is time to just clear the apps that do not serve you well. There's a couple of ways of doing this.
Absolutely.
I have used an app blocker. I'm getting really practical, but I think it's important. There's an app blocker called Opal, OPAL, which has been so good for me in different times. You can get a free version or you can pay for it. The paid version, it completely takes over your phone. So you will not be able to get into those apps without deleting Opal. So just begin, deleting apps from your phone. Turn your phone into a tool. That's the main thing. Turn your phone into a tool. So you might be on your phone, on Google Maps or on, Spotify or using the camera, and your screen time might be still higher because of those things. But those are tools, those are, you would have an MP3 player, or you would have a camera, or you'd have a map. Those are tools that we're using. We're not just isolating ourselves and doom scrolling, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Week 3, interestingly, is find something to do that replaces the time you used to spend on your phone. So here's one. I get a little graphic. People use their phones in the toilet. Stack some books in the toilet and get some, that everyone used to always do that. Used to always be books in the toilet because you just, get some books in the toilet, get whatever it is. It might be something, it might be a physical Sudoku for the train. Just get something in your life which is different to the phone, and watch your brain engage with a new practice, without the temptation, of using it. And then week 4 is go 24 hours without it. So choose a day that and it's week 4, so you can kind of plan it. It's a month from now. You're going to plan a day where for a 24-hour period, and obviously it's probably going to be on a day off, where you're not you don't have demands of work. You plan 24 hours to be completely free of it, and just acknowledge what that does. And then week 1 starts again. Your phone isn't in your room. You've got less distracting apps. You've got a new habit that you kind of are practicing, and you have an expectation of, what it feels like to be away from it for 24 hours, and you've already done that, so you can do it again.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Actually, the word fast came to mind. It's a fast, isn't it? It's a Sabbath. It's a fast. And there are so many apps that we could look at. I mean, for me, for example, I get so easily distracted by the news, by chess. I love online chess. I just thought, no, I just had to take those off my app because they just waste time.
Yeah,
and so we need to take some stuff off, and then other maybe use. Sorry, what's that app again that you use to?
There's a few of them, but I found
control your app.
Yeah, OPAL is really, really effective. Yeah, it's really good.
Well, there are other things as well, aren't there? Like making your screen monochrome and others. But I think the at the end of the day, there's also just tackling the heart issue, recognizing that you're using it as an anesthetic, and maybe it will do so much better to confront what it is we're trying to escape from. Yeah, that's so helpful, Josh. It's interesting. I thought we could talk about it. I think for myself, it's an area that I've made progress in, but I know how easy it is just to slip back. And I'm sure many of us listening to this will recognize it's a battle we keep needing to revisit.
Absolutely. It is for me. Yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks once again. And I do hope that over coming days, a good number of people are going to download your course and enjoy practicing various disciplines that are going to help us live from rest.
Yeah, brilliant.
We'll see you again soon, Josh.
Thanks. Great to chat.
Thank you. I hope you found that discussion helpful. A reminder that you can enjoy Josh's Living from Rest course completely free. It's a great resource for small groups, and it can be used by individuals. It's available via our app or from our website, livefromrest.com. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please do share it and rate it. Thank you for joining me, and God bless you. See you next time. Bye for now.